Well, emotional intelligence is composed of three competencies: emotional self-awareness, emotional self-regulation, and empathy. Learn empathy, and you'll immediately develop emotional self-awareness and emotional self-regulation. We saw this happen thousands of times with people serving life and long-term sentences in prisons. So that's the secret. How do you learn empathy? If you want to follow my processes, go ahead, get a copy of De-escalate and pre-order Empathy Leadership, where I go through all the science and lay out how to do it. What the difference between what I teach and how I work, and other people like Brene Brown or Simon Sinek or all these other gurus, is that they don't ever tell you how to do it. I mean, when Stephen Covey wrote the Seven Successful Habits, I think it was chapter 6 or 7, 27 pages on the importance of listening. It was the longest chapter in his book about listening, and not one word about how to listen, just why it's important. And that kind of stuff kind of drives me crazy, because if you don't know how, being told what to do doesn't do you any good. So that's why all of my books and all of my teaching is all focused on the how. How do you do this?
All right, guys, welcome to the Winner's Circle podcast. Today, it's going to be a great conversation. If you're joining us live, thank you for waiting. It's going to be a great conversation. And the title of the podcast for today is going to be How Entrepreneurs Can Turn Difficult Conversation into Breakthrough. I have a very interesting guest today. That's Noll, an award-winning mediator, best-selling author. He's a speaker, he's a trainer, and the creator of Noll method. And Dog is known for helping people de-escalate conflict by listening to and naming emotion. So before becoming a full-time peacemaker, Dog spent more than 2 decades as a trial lawyer. He later transitioned into mediation, conflict resolution, and leadership training, working with business leaders, corporate teams, institutions, and communities facing difficult and emotionally charged conflict. Dog is also known as the co-founder of the Prison of Peace project, an initiative that teaches deep listening, leadership, problem solving, and conflict resolution skills inside prison community, which is a very great work. And his work shows that even in the most difficult environment, transformation is possible. So when people learn how to truly listen and respond instead of react, the world will be a better place. He's also the author of De-escalate, like de-escalate, how to calm an angry person in 90 seconds or less. I need to, every one of us needs to grab that book because, especially if you're from New York, because a lot of people are like, they react so much. And also his work speaks directly to what entrepreneurs face every day. That is pressure. I mean, you and me, everyone listening to this, if you're an entrepreneur, you know how it is. The pressure, the conflict, the negotiation, the miscommunication, even difficult clients, team tensions, and hard decisions. And that's one thing that's always brought us to our faith. So now, today, we're going to have a very, very great conversation. And the conversation is going to be chaired or anchored by a great person. So, Doug, welcome to the Winner Circle.
Thanks, Jay. Great to be here.
All right, you're welcome. So, but before we get into the strategy, because I know you have a lot of strategy, because your profile, shows you have thousands of strategy you can give us today. But we're just going to grab one or two information from you. I mean, that can change a lot of lives of people listening. So before we get into that strategy, can you share your journey from being a trial lawyer to becoming a peacemaker and a mediator? Because I know trial lawyer is not trying to make peace.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a journey that I expected, that's for sure. First of all, Jay, let me say this for you. For all of you people who are listening to this podcast, whether you're on Spotify or Apple or wherever you are, please give Jay a 5-star review. Every podcaster needs 5 stars to get notoriety and to get more audience to continue to do the great work they're doing. And Jay's got one of the best podcasts out there. He deserves your help. So please give him a 5-star. Now, to
Okay.
get to my story. I'm 75 years old. I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in affluence and privilege. I went to Dartmouth College as Ivy League, studied English literature, came back to California, went to law school, did well in law school, law review, dean's list, that sort of thing. Ended up after law school being a law clerk for an appellate judge, which is what you did when you did well in law school in those days. And then ended up moving to Central California, where I live now, and joined a law firm as a young associate in September of 1978. And in October of 1978, I tried my first civil jury trial. And that's how my career began. The partners of that firm just dumped me into the courtroom and said, sink or swim. So I swam. And for the next 22 years, I tried jury trials, in bench trials, arbitrations, all kinds of contested hearings, administrative hearings, all kinds of stuff in every imaginable form: federal court, state court, arbitrations, Ninth Circuit, appellate work. I was just a trial dog, and specializing in highly complex commercial and business disputes. So I didn't do personal injury. I didn't do divorce. I didn't do plaintiffs or defense work. I sued insurance companies a lot. So that's what I did. And then along the way, I picked up the martial arts. And around my 40th birthday in 1990, I was awarded my second degree black belt in a Northern Chinese style of Kung Fu. And my teacher told me that he wanted me to start studying Tai Chi as a martial art. So I did. And Tai Chi has two very interesting paradoxes. The first is the softer you are, the stronger you are. And the second paradox is the more vulnerable you are, the more powerful you are. Well, that didn't really compute too well for me, being a hardcore trial lawyer and now a secondary black belt. But eventually, it sunk into me, and I didn't realize that it had sunk into my soul. So a few years later, I was trying a case. I was in the courtroom cross-examining somebody, and the thought came to me, what the heck am I doing in here? And after that trial, I had a vacation planned, a whitewater trip up in Idaho with a bunch of buddies. And I spent the week powering through these big rapids in my raft, thinking about how many people I'd really served as a trial lawyer. And I could only count 5 people over 20 plus years that I'd really served. And I said, I just can't do this anymore. So I came back after that trip, I was driving down out of the mountains of Central Sierra Nevada down to my office in Fresno, and heard a public service announcement for a new master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies being offered at Fresno Pacific University. And it caught my attention. And to make a very long story short, I ended up enrolling. And for 3 years, I was a full-time graduate student, again, a 3/4 time law professor at our local law school, and a full-time trial lawyer. My partners and I had many conversations around the direction I wanted to take in my career, and they were not happy with me because I was the second largest earner in the firm, and they did not want to see the goose stop laying golden eggs. So ultimately, I left. And in November of 2000, I left the firm and opened my own peacemaking and mediation practice. One of the things that I did not have, I had learned a lot, and I actually started studying neuroscience. This is in 97, 98, 99, before anybody knew what neuroscience was. The one thing I did not have was a good way to calm people down and to have these difficult conversations that you were referring to before, Jay. I had studied active listening. I'd taken active listening classes. I'd studied nonviolent communication, taken nonviolent communication classes. I'd taken every kind of listening class that I could find, and it was all junk. None of it worked, especially in the kinds of high conflict, high stakes disputes that I was being paid big bucks to walk into and help people solve. That all changed in 2005, and I won't go through the whole detail of the insight that I got. For those who are interested, my TEDx just landed a couple of weeks ago, so if you go to Doug Noll, Listen Someone into Existence on Google, that TEDx will come up, and in that 12 minutes, I describe the trajectory of all of this. However, I discovered through this insight an extremely powerful way and very simple way to de-escalate any brain and central nervous system in 90 seconds or less. And that led to it led to co-founding the Prison of Peace Project with my colleague Laurel Coffer and training life and long-term inmates for 10 years in California and Connecticut how to become peacemakers and mediators to stop prison violence. And the very first skill we taught them was how to recognize and name emotions. And that led to my fourth book, De-escalate, which is now in 5 languages. It also led to my 5th book coming out in September called Empathy Leadership, where I'm taking these same ideas and showing leaders how to engage in what I call nervous system leadership. Your job as a leader is not just to delegate tasks and make sure the tasks get done. Your job as a leader is to regulate the nervous systems of yourself and the people around you. Because if people have dysregulated nervous systems, their prefrontal cortex shuts down and they can't do anything. And you were talking about, Jay, some of the problems that entrepreneurs and founders and business owners and CEOs face today with retention, loyalty, trust, safety, and productivity, and the conflict is rampant in organizations. And it's actually, for a leader, it's actually pretty easy to fix. So we can talk about exactly how you do this. But that, in a nutshell, is where we're at. So here I am at 75, and I'm still going strong and teaching and training. My life passion is teaching people the skills that we'll talk about in just a minute.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that information. And it's very powerful words. And for the fact that you told me you're 75, I was thinking probably you were like in your 30s because you look very, very young and strong
Thank
and
you.
agile. So, this part of it, I want to, follow up question to, what you already said earlier. You know, you know, what you talked about is powerful. I mean, leaving something that's powerful, great, and especially being a,
Your website is your hardest working employee. If it's not building trust and converting visitors, it's costing you growth. At Nixall Designs, we don't just build websites, we build business assets. We specialize in high-end website design, strategic redesigns, and high-converting landing pages. From custom e-commerce experiences to integrated lead capture systems, every pixel is shaped for performance. Our strategy-led approach ensures your brand identity is clear and credible across every device. We bridge the gap between creative design and the technical systems that drive real results. Stop settling for a website that just exists. Start growing with a digital presence built to convert. Look credible. Grow confidently. Book your free consultation today at nwixalldesigns.com.
strong attorney, making all the bucks and all that, to focusing on, changing people's lives because, what you're doing, de-escalating, changes a lot of lives. Because, I mean, some people, because of anger, they landed in prison, just few seconds of anger or reaction instead of just, de-escalating.
That's
So,
right.
yeah, so if I'm going to look at the another angle to it right now is you being a lawyer, and I mean, what did the courtroom really teach you about human emotions and difficult conversations too?
Well, I think I can answer that by saying the courtroom taught me that the courtrooms are really bad places, really bad places to try to reconcile relationships and get people together to have difficult conversations when they're so mad at each other that they can barely stand to be in the same room with each other. And I think that's what drove me out of the courtroom. I was a very good trial lawyer, but I think I was getting dissatisfied because I wasn't really helping people. I mean, think about it. I had tried over 200 cases, 100 jury trials, something like that. I've lost count. And only 5 people really came out of the system better than when they went in over 20 years. That doesn't say a lot for me, nor does it say a lot for the system that people were actually improved. And actually, the court system is not designed for any of that. Our legal system is simply a decision-making system. People have a conflict, and it has legal ramifications. They hire lawyers, and then a judge or a jury is going to make a decision about how the conflict should be resolved. There's no justice. There's substantive justice there, and there is no interest in how the decision will ultimately affect the relationship of the parties. So there's a good reason why people are dissatisfied with lawyers and the court system, because they go in thinking that things are going to be made right.
Yeah.
And that's not what happens at all in the courtroom. And so people have expectations that are unmet, and all of that was really grating on me. I said, there has to be a better way to help people resolve conflict than through this process. And that's why I went back to school and spent 3 years studying human conflict to understand it so that I could do what I do today.
All right, that's so powerful. So now I've seen some of your videos, and I often hear you say words like listening to emotions.
Right.
So why is emotion so central to conflict?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's a whole journey unto itself. Here's something that I've learned. Now, I'm trained as a lawyer. I'm a law professor. I still teach at Crusoe School of Law at Pepperdine University at the Strauss Institute of Dispute Resolution. And
That's nice.
so I'm not somebody who's on the fringe of the law, but this is what I've learned. There's no such thing as rationality. And how I will say that we do have the capacity for deliberative thinking, such as logic, reason, and critical thinking skills, that sort of thing. But that does not define who we are. Those are skills that we acquire, and they don't define our human nature. What science tells us is that every decision we make, every behavior we engage in, is based on emotion. And yet, we live in a culture that tells us that emotions are bad, emotions are weak, emotions are evil, emotions make us susceptible to exploitation, emotions are feminine. All of this pejorative language around the one aspect that makes us human, because only humans have emotions, not even dogs. And even your dogs, cats don't have emotion. They have something else. They're called affect. And we have affect too. So once I had that insight and began to realize that we are emotional beings with occasional moments of clear deliberative thinking, and mostly that is just a few moments a day where we really get that clarity because everything else is pretty much on autopilot, what Kahneman calls system one thinking. Then it became an interesting exercise to discover, what does this really mean? And that's when I primed myself to have this insight in 2005 in a very difficult mediation, to listen to and name the emotions rather than try to persuade with logic or reasoning that one story or another is correct. 2 years after that, in 2000, a brain scanning study came out of Matthew Lieberman's lab at UCLA that supported exactly what I had observed, that when you name what someone feels, the centers of the brain associated with negative emotions are diminished in activity, they're inhibited, and one part of the brain, the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for emotional self-regulation and emotional self-control, is activated. So what happens when you name somebody's emotions is you literally calm the brain and the central nervous system. And it happens automatically. It happens outside of consciousness, and it works on every single human brain on the planet because we're all hardwired to calm down when somebody names our emotions. This was an amazing insight and scary because the idea of telling somebody what they feel, for me in the beginning, was really, really scary. It went against everything I knew about communication and listening and talking to people. But it turns out that it is the only skill that will allow you to have a difficult conversation and transform it into something meaningful for both you and the other person you're talking to. Nothing else works. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Wow, difficult conversation. You know, that word itself, because I know when entrepreneurs hear the phrase, that word, difficult conversation you just mentioned right now, many they immediately think of conflict. So for
Right.
you, how would you define that word, difficult conversation?
So a difficult conversation is any kind of conversation that you have to have with somebody that provokes anxiety inside you. You're worried about it. You're afraid of it. You're afraid of the confrontation. You're afraid that you're going to lose control. You're afraid that somebody else is going to explode in anger at you and yell at you. You're afraid you're going to be rejected or betrayed or abandoned. You're afraid that the other person is going to be uncontrollable and scream and yell or leave or quit or do something adverse to you. And this provokes anxiety. And because it provokes anxiety, you go into avoidance mode. Anything but this conversation, right? And that's the way that's the way we're trained. We're trained from a very young age to avoid emotion, to avoid difficult conversations. We're not trained as children how to have difficult conversations. In fact, we're trained just the opposite. We're trained that if it's a difficult problem, suppress it. Don't talk about it. It's not true, because our parents and caregivers didn't want to have difficult conversations because it provoked their anxiety. And so, for example, I know you grew up was it Nigeria where you grew up?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So I want you to just think, Jay, for a moment, when you were a child in Nigeria and you're running around and you scrape your knee and it starts to bleed and you start crying a little bit. I'm curious, what were you told by your Nigerian parents or caregivers?
I mean, I was told to just, keep it in, bottle it in.
There you go. Same thing here. Same thing with me. Suck it up. It doesn't hurt. Big boys don't cry.
Yeah, exactly.
Rub dirt in it, right? All of that stuff. That is the most pervasive and insidious form of child abuse that exists. And it's absolutely everywhere. And we've all suffered through it because our parents didn't know any better. When you emotionally invalidate a child, you're telling that child that emotions are bad, emotions are evil. You're not allowed to feel. And what the science shows is that when, as a child, you are subjected to that, your emotional maturation process literally stops. And that's why we look at 40-year-olds who are arguing and we say, hey, they're acting like 6-year-olds. What is their problem? And that's because they have literally regressed back to the highest level of emotional maturity under stress, which is somewhere between 6 and 8 years old. When you listen to emotions and name them, that whole dynamic changes. Everything changes because you're no longer triggered and upset, and the other person calms down in literally 90 to 120 seconds. They go from a state of rage to a state of calm.
State of calm. That's so powerful. So now, let's make it practical because I love practicality.
How do you do it?
Yeah, so we're just gonna have a conversation making it practical. So let's give an example. So if a client, for example, is angry about a delay. A delay, yeah. So what should an entrepreneur say first?
Okay. The first thing you need to do is ignore your client's angry words. A client comes in and is really angry because you didn't meet deadlines, and you're going to have a counter narrative. Your client has a story and you're going to have a counter story, right? This is what happened. And this is why the delays occurred. It wasn't our fault, coach. It's the other linebacker that missed the block, not me, right? So that's going to be the standard response. And all that response will do is make the client even angrier. So we're not going to try to work with counter narratives. We're not going to try to persuade, because you cannot logic somebody out of a strong emotion. You cannot reason somebody into calm. It does not work. We all know this, but we still try to do it because we don't know any better. So here's how the conversation would go. Jay, you're really frustrated and you're angry. The deadlines were missed and it's caused you and your team a lot of grief. You feel completely disrespected. You don't feel like you're being listened to, and you feel completely unsupported and unappreciated. And this problem is making you really worried and concerned and nervous because it's going to have downstream effects on you and your profitability. And then I pause. And what does Jay say? What does Jay say? So you're the client. What would you say?
I'm trying to process it in because I don't have any words to say anymore. Like
That's right.
the
You can't.
attacking part of me.
Probably what you would say is, yeah, that's exactly right, Doug. What's your problem?
Yeah.
And I would say, okay, so you're still really angry and frustrated, and you're looking for solutions, and you're totally confused right now and overwhelmed. And finally, you say, yeah, exactly. I said, all right, what do we need to do to make this right with you right now? What has to happen right now to make this right? So once you calm people down, you can move into problem solving, and you ask a very open-ended question like, what do we need to do to solve this problem? What do we do to make things right? What do you need right now to have this problem go away? What other solutions can you think of to help solve this problem and prevent it from happening again? So, but you can't have that conversation with those open-ended questions until you've calmed the emotional brain down and brought the prefrontal cortex back online. Because what happens is this client is coming in, threat status is activated. The amygdala is firing off, what's known as the HPA, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis is firing off. Cortisol is flooding into their brain. Their brain cannot distinguish the difference between this deadline being missed and all the problems that's creating and a saber-toothed tiger leaping at them. Making that distinction is the part of the prefrontal cortex work, which is now shut down because it's only focused on trying to get rid of the threat. And until you understand this is what I call nervous system leadership. You have a dysregulated nervous system right now. The client is dysregulated. Hopefully you can maintain your own regulation. But until you re-regulate that system and help your client calm down, no solution, no matter how good, will work. It will just simply make your client even angrier. So the secret to having a difficult conversation is not to persuade, argue, reason, justify, explain, rationalize, justify, or offer up new solutions. The secret is to start by naming emotions. And here's something else, Jay, that's very important. You got to be direct about it. You got to use you statements. We're all trained in active listening to use I statements. Gee, what I think you're feeling is anger. No, does not work. Nonviolent communication does not work. If that stuff worked, I'd be using it. It doesn't work. The only thing that works is a direct you statement. 2 words, you feel. Check out my TEDx talk. You'll see why I talk about that. You feel angry, or you're angry. You feel frustrated. You feel disrespected and not heard. And the thing that's going to happen, Jay, is as you begin to practice and master this skill, you're going to see the same patterns over and over again. So your client comes in and really angry about a delay. Then your vice president comes in angry about something else. And then your HRO comes in really angry about something else in human relations. It's the same anger, the same disrespect, the same feeling of not being heard and not being appreciated, the same anxiety and fear, the same sense of offense, the same shame, humiliation, and guilt, the same sadness and loss of connection and upset. And at the bottom, the same feelings of abandonment, betrayal, rejection, and literally feeling unloved. That's what drives us all. And we all have exactly the same feelings in conflict, which makes this process so powerful. Because once you see the pattern, you know exactly what to do. And it works every single time. And I'll just say, and I've trained way over 3,000 incarcerated people how to be peacemakers and mediators in maximum security prisons. And what we saw over 10 years was, instead of solving fights and arguments with knives and fists, our students were solving those conflicts by naming emotions over and over and over again. If it works on a prison yard, it's going to work in your boardroom.
Wow, that's a very powerful TED talk. And even the practical part of it, when we did the practical part of it, when you spoke about you name everything, the emotions, name everything. It was really even hard for me as a client who was angry, because you named everything
right
that's happening to me. So I'm like, okay, what else can I say about myself that
you can't?
Because
it takes all the energy out of you.
You took all the guns from me, so I can't even shoot anyone else. And which is very powerful. But another thing is, what's very powerful also. What would you say? I just want those 2 answers in that context for those for that particular conversation, that I wasn't able to have, which should be, what should they avoid saying in the first 30 seconds? There's what you can say, but what should entrepreneurs or to de-escalate or, to name emotion, what should they avoid saying in that
Okay.
first 30 seconds?
What do
And
you
apart from
avoid
that
saying?
also,
Well, avoid saying anything else other than what I'm talking about. So what are some of the things that we automatically say? Oh, that's not what I meant. You're not being reasonable here. Let's just look at it from another perspective. Hey, it wasn't our fault. You guys didn't get the information to us on time. So of course there was going to be a delay. These are all the kinds of things that we would typically say. Well, the deadline occurred because of we had somebody in our organization who screwed up and that person's no longer here. So that problem will never happen again. These are all the kinds of things that we say that make it worse. Or you might say something even worse, like, hey, man, calm down, chill out. No reason to get upset about this. You're lucky you're not going to get punched in the face for saying that. So what we're trying to do when we make these kinds of statements is we're soothing our own anxiety over the upset of another person. We're really literally trying to soothe ourselves by telling somebody to calm down or be reasonable or look at it from my perspective. We're trying to get them, what our brain is kind of perversely doing is saying, if you stop emoting, if you stop feeling what you're feeling, I'll stop feeling anxious and that'll make me feel better. So just quit what you're doing so I can feel better myself. And of course, that doesn't work. It never has and it never will. It just makes things infinitely more difficult. That's why the only response you have in conflict, anger, difficult conversation, anytime you see a dysregulated nervous system on a team or a team member, your go-to response is to take 90 seconds and name their emotions. I'll tell you a quick story. I work a fair amount with power couples. These are couples who have very successful, high-powered careers, make a lot of money, and they've kind of grown apart. They still love each other. They're not in divorce mode, and they want to come together and have more intimacy. So some of them reach out to me and say, teach us how to listen to each other. So I do. And I'll never forget, actually, this is a very recent story, working with a client couple, and it was the first week into our coaching. And we coach for 1 hour a week. And he comes in and he's just beaming in the second call. And he says, you won't believe what happened. And I said, well, tell me. He said, well, I got a Venezuelan vice president and he's really hot tempered. And we were in an executive meeting and he just went off like he does. And just everybody kind of went back and said, oh my God, here we go again. He came into my office after the meeting. I had your little cheat sheet. And I just decided all I'm going to do is name his emotions. And so he started going off on me. And I said, you're angry, you're frustrated. And I just went right down the list, just like you told me to do. In 5 minutes, it was all over with. He nodded his head and said, thanks a lot. That won't happen again. Got up, walked out, and he was perfectly calm. It would have taken us months to get through that. And in 5 minutes, the whole problem was solved. And I just smiled and said, yep, that's how it works.
So that is a very, very powerful way to approach that. But one thing came to mind. How would you say that you can de-escalate without accepting blame? Or
Good
yes.
question. So what I teach is apology for appeasement is problem solving. Don't apologize or appease until you've calmed people down. If somebody's really angry and they're yelling at you because they think you're at fault or you're the one that's created the offense, our tendency is to want to calm them down by appeasing. I'm so sorry that this happened. I'm so sorry you feel this way. Don't. Not about you. It's about them. Calm them down. First of all, you don't know whether or not you're the one at fault or not. And until you get them calmed down and you can really start examining what happened, you're not going to know. So early apology, early appeasement is going to be counterproductive every single time. Calm them down, de-escalate. You're really angry, frustrated, disrespected, unappreciated. You feel a little embarrassed. You're sad, whatever it might be. And then when they're calmed down, they say, yeah, exactly. And you say, okay, so tell me what exactly happened here. Now, if you are at fault, then of course you apologize. But most of the time you're going to find out you're not at fault. You're just the target. And people putting the blame on you, even though you're not the one at fault. And so your apology will be meaningless and unnecessary. So do not engage in early problem solving. Listen to and name the emotions with a you statement you feel before you do anything else. Then when they're calmed down, you can start exploring what's going to be the best solution to the problem here. But again, we go to early problem solving to soothe our own anxiety over the other person's upset. They're yelling and screaming at you. If you're not trained in this, your typical reaction is going to go, get defensive and feel anxiety and fear. And now you're dysregulated. And now you want to do whatever it takes to stop feeling dysregulated because it's really uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And try to calm yourself down by telling the other person to stop feeling. And it doesn't work. It just makes it worse
Of
over and
course.
over and over again.
hmm So let's go away from the client facing part of it. Let's talk about team leadership because I know that's one thing that entrepreneurs go through every day,
Right.
and we talk about the difficult conversation. So now, if you have, if you, a founder, how should they have that word difficult conversation with an employee who's underperforming?
Underperforming employee. First of
Yes.
all, that conversation should be in private. I think that goes without
Mm,
saying.
mm,
The it's always going to depend on context. However, what you want to do is to get you don't want to give the employee any kind of advice or directive or instruction or even threat until the employee is calmed down. So an employee gets called into your office, team leader, maybe a direct report or a secondary reporter, somebody that you are going to have to talk to personally, and you're unhappy with their performance. So you call them into your office, and the first thing you need to do is make sure that your own nervous system is regulated. You want to be really calm. So how do you do this? Well, you can do a little bit of breathing. So one breathing exercise is to breathe in, exhale, and then breathe in, exhale. So it will go breathe in, exhale, breathe in, and then breathe in again. Exhale. That will calm you. That settles part of your central nervous system called your vagus nerve, your vagal nerve. And so that will calm you down, helps calm you down. And then the other thing you can do is you name your own emotions. I'm really nervous and anxious about this upcoming meeting with John. And I'm not sure what's going to happen here. And I got to tell him the truth, but I'm really worried that he's not going to take it well. And I don't know what's going to happen. And that's kind of scary to me. So I just name my own emotions, and that automatically calms me down. Now, let's say John comes in the office and he sits down. The first thing you've got to do is look at John and assess his nervous system state. Is it regulated or dysregulated? Probably going to be dysregulated. So the way I would start is say, John, your performance has fallen off in the last couple of months. We've talked about this a little bit. Tell me what's going on. Get John to talk with an open-ended question. And as John talks, your only job is to name John's emotions. So you're really frustrated and you're really unhappy and you faced a lot of pushback from other people and it's really affected your performance. You know it's affected your performance and you're super, super sensitive about that. And you're really worried and anxious. And eventually John's going to say, yeah, exactly right. And then you can say, all right, what do we need to do to solve this problem? Don't tell him what to do. Have him offer up solutions. And then now you're in a negotiation. And you can negotiate a performance review process that allows John to figure out how to solve the problem himself, but provides accountability. So one of the things that you want to have in this conversation is you want to say, so what are all the things that are going to get in the way, John, of you turning around your performance? Let's just talk about everything that can get in your way. So you're looking at all the failure points. And then you ask the question, so John, if you're not able to perform in the way that we've been talking about here, what do we do? What should be the next step? And you get John to talk about failure points. So that's how you go about doing it. Now, I personally think that if it has gotten to this point, and let's say John is either a direct report or indirect report to you, and you have to have this conversation, you have failed as a leader.
Hmm.
This is a failure point on you. because you're not coaching properly. What I teach is that for every one of your direct reports and for one level down, you should be every day coaching for improvement, because adults do not like criticism or judgment. None of us do. But we do like being coached for improvement. So when you coach for improvement, it's a two-step process. The first thing you do is name one specific thing that your team member has done well that you want them to keep doing. So something like, hey, John, you are really good about getting your reports in on time. One thing I can really count on is that you don't miss deadlines. Okay, so that's a positive coach for improvement. Now I want to offer a suggestion for improvement. Not a criticism, not a judgment, just how to improve. So, John, one thing you might consider doing is taking more time editing your reports, because they're about twice as long as they need to be. And your insights are good, but they get lost in all the words. So see what you can do about cutting down the length and being more concise. And now I haven't judged, I haven't criticized. I've said, try to be more concise. See if you can be more concise. I've offered a suggestion for improvement. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for incremental improvement. And if you give that kind of coaching advice 3 or 4 times a week over the course of a year to every single one of your direct reports, you're going to see massive shifts in performance. And you're never going to have the difficult conversation around your performance sucks. So coaching for improvement is by far and away one of the most important things that a leader can do. And most leaders have never heard of this before. They don't have a clue about how to do it. So it's just one of the things that I teach.
I guess we have to have another great conversation that's going to be specific or dedicated to that particular kind of conversation. Because I mean, a lot of leaders there's so many wealth of knowledge that our listeners, I mean, the Winner Circle community would love to learn from you, which is, I mean, I believe even 1 hour, 3 hours you can't get all the information
No.
we need.
No.
Yeah. And,
there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. So as we begin to round off, I want to ask one particular question, which is very, very important. A lot of people, I mean, most of the words and most of the conversation is focused on being having empathy, being emotional, naming emotions and all that, being reasonable as a leader. But some entrepreneurs, they fear that being empathetic will make you look weak. What would you say to
The
them?
empathy paradox. So my 5th book coming out in September is called Empathy Leadership. And one of the things that it's wonderful to write a book. I mean, it's a lot of work, but you learn so much. I've learned so much. So we have this situation in leadership that I call the empathy paradox. On the one hand, there are studies that show just what you said, Jay, that leaders look at empathy as making them look weak or indecisive or losing power, losing authority, making them look touchy-feely, too soft, right? And there is another set of studies that says the single most important determinant of leadership success is empathy. So that's the paradox. On the one hand, the things that leaders want the most, they want to create safety, trust, loyalty, engagement, keep retention, keep productivity high, keep morale up, keep people motivated and excited to be doing their work. These are things that leaders want. Every single good leader wants those things. And the only way that they're guaranteed to get those things from their people is by empathy. The problem is that they have not been trained in empathy. And it is a learnable, measurable skill, but they have never been trained how to do it properly. And it's not, you don't take a course in business school, right? Empathy 101. It's just not there, because the business professors don't have a clue about this stuff. They don't study neuroscience. They don't have none of the people just don't have a deep understanding of how and why human empathy is so powerful and important. And it's not a trait. It's not a nice thing to have. It's essential, and it's not hard to learn. And guess what? Empathy is really simple. You feel. Going right back to the de-escalation work. Instead of de-escalating, you simply say whatever emotion they're feeling in the moment. You feel angry. You're frustrated. You're disrespected. When you do that, the very things that I outlined in my fourth book, and now I take it in my fifth book and show you how to use it in a leadership context. You are calming their brains. You are taking a dysregulated nervous system and regulating it. And you're bringing people back into a place from a central nervous system perspective where they could begin to make decisions and perform again.
Mm.
All you have to do is label. And I have a little acronym that I created in the book called ARA. Ask, reflect, acknowledge. I'm sorry, acknowledge, reflect, and ask. And it's just a simple little tool. Takes you about 30 or 40 seconds to use.
Mm.
And by validating what one of your reports feels, you calm them down and you build that safety, trust, loyalty, and safety that everybody needs. And it costs you nothing to do it, and it takes less than a minute. And that's the power of it. That's the power of leadership empathy. Think of it as a skill, not as some soft skill or some touchy-feely thing that's nice to have. You are regulating dysregulated nervous systems. That's why I call it nervous system leadership. You're not telling people what to do. That's not your job, not part of your job.
Mm.
But your real job is to make sure that people feel safe, trusted, and that they matter. That's your job as a leader. And when you can accomplish all of that at a nervous system level, then all the other high level stuff, decision-making, reasoning, logic, persuasion, all that all falls into place. But if you started that high level stuff with a dysregulated nervous system, you are wasting your time and you're going to get really frustrated because their nervous systems are not ready to engage in that kind of high level cognitive processing.
Mm.
So that's the secret to all of it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that word. And it's very powerful. And I really want to appreciate you for your time today. Before we start rounding up, what would be your final advice to founders who want to become a more emotional, intelligent leader?
Well, emotional intelligence is composed of three competencies: emotional self-awareness, emotional self-regulation, and empathy. Learn empathy, and you'll immediately develop emotional self-awareness and emotional self-regulation. We saw this happen thousands of times with people serving life and long-term sentences in prisons. So that's the secret. How do you learn empathy? If you want to follow my processes, go ahead, get a copy of De-escalate and pre-order Empathy Leadership, where I go through all the science and lay out how to do it. What the difference between what I teach and how I work and other people like Brene Brown or Simon Sinek or all these other gurus is that they don't ever tell you how to do it. I mean, when Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Successful Habits, I think it was chapter 6 or 7, 27 pages on the importance of listening. It was the longest chapter in his book about listening. And not one word about how to listen, just why it's important. And that kind of stuff kind of drives me crazy, because if you don't know how, being told what to do doesn't do you any good. So that's why all of my books and all of my teaching is all focused on the how. How do you do this? So if you're really interested in this, get a copy of my book. Empathy Leadership's coming out in the fall. I also have a YouTube channel. I think you looked at some of my videos, Jay. I've got over almost 270 videos. Go to Douglas Noll YouTube. And I got a ton of instructional videos where I talk about this stuff. I demonstrate what it looks like. And then reach out to me. I'm a sole practitioner. I don't have an entourage or a huge organization. You can just email me at doug@dougnoll.com. And that's spelled Noll, by the way, not Knoll. And we can chat. And I can point you in whatever direction you need to go in to learn these skills. It typically takes my clients 8 to 10 weeks in a coaching sessions, 1-hour coaching sessions, to get these skills mastered to the level that they can go off and continue to grow. So it is not a difficult, long process. The biggest problem is overcoming the fear of telling somebody what they fear. That's the biggest problem. Once you overcome that fear, then it's just a function of practice, like riding a bicycle.
Growth doesn't fail because of ambition. It fails because of missing structure. Point of View Consulting helps entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and growing organizations turn vision into clear strategy, stronger operations, smarter systems, and measurable execution. Stop managing chaos. Start building for scale. Book your strategic consultation today at pointofviewconsultinginc.com.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing those information. And like you already mentioned talked about how they can grab your book. But if you have the website, a link or where they can actually grab your books, your training, how they can actually do, you can also share that. You give them your email already, but if you have other places that, they can check out your work.
The easiest thing to do is just go to dougnoll.com, DOUGNOLL.com. Start there, or go to my LinkedIn profile and find me on LinkedIn. I'm LinkedIn Doug Noll. LinkedIn, what is it? LinkedIn.com/in/Doug Noll. I'm one of the early LinkedIn adopters, so I have one of the older names. Check me. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me, DM me, whatever you want. That's an easy way to do it. Email me, go to the website, dougnoll.com. And the other thing that I tell people to do, which is always fun, is to go to your favorite AI platform, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever, and say, give me an intelligence dossier on Doug Noll, lawyer to peacemaker, and see what it comes up with. See what it comes up with.
Okay, I guess I'm going to do that myself. I never thought about that. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a fun way to find out about me.
All right. That's great. Thank you so much for your time. Before we go, I always do rapid. It's called rapid questions. It's just like it's just going to be like for 1 minute, 2 minutes.
Quick answer. Got it.
Yes, quick answer, just less than one sentence.
Okay.
So now, what would you say is the best first step for someone who wants to learn de-escalation?
First steps. Do this. Next time you go to Starbucks, order your coffee, your sugar load disguised as coffee. Give the barista your credit card and say, you're really happy today. Wow, you're really happy today. Just do that and watch what happens. That's your first step.
What would you say they should practice daily?
Pardon me now?
What should they practice daily? What should entrepreneurs practice daily?
You should literally practice daily telling a stranger what they're feeling, and start with happy emotions. That's why I like Starbucks. Hey, you're really happy today. Or to a clerk, the checkout clerk at the grocery store, you're really happy today, even though they look, they're always bored and surly. Just say, hey, you're happy, and watch what happens. This skill should be practiced daily until it becomes automatic. You want to develop that unconscious competency. And that comes with just practice. And it takes, like I said, 8 to 10 weeks of constant practice before it becomes unconscious.
What should entrepreneurs stop doing immediately?
What should entrepreneurs do? What now?
What should they stop doing immediately?
What they
should stop doing immediately.
Okay, so what you want, I think the best way to describe it is stop soothing your anxiety over upset. Become aware of the fact that if you're facing a difficult conversation or conflict or some kind of upset, that you're going to be experiencing anxiety. Become aware of that anxiety. Manage your own anxiety before you try to manage somebody else's. And start really becoming aware of that.
What would you say is the skills that creates the fastest improvement in leadership conversation?
The fastest improvement is going to come from you listening to another person and reflecting their feelings and what they're saying from their frame of reference. Do not make difficult conversations about yourself. Do not use I statements. Use you statements. And eventually you'll get to a place where you can engage in problem solving and negotiate, but not in the beginning. That's the fastest way to get through anything that's difficult or challenging.
All right. So last question, what should they do? Because they're human beings and they have emotions. So what should entrepreneurs or leaders do when they are angry, offended, or disappointed?
Where the leader or entrepreneur is feeling emotion. The best thing you can do is label your own emotions. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I don't feel heard. I don't feel respected. I feel like I just really disrespected. Say it to yourself silently if you have to. Don't tell anybody else, but you've got to acknowledge your own emotional experience. And it has the same essential effect as naming somebody else's emotion.
All right. That's so powerful. I want to say, Doug, this has been a powerful conversation.
Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome. Because every entrepreneur listening, hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands, they're going to even listen to this in the future, the recorded version. They can think of one conversation they have delayed, avoided, or even mishandled. And to be honest, what you've shown us today is that difficult conversation do not have to be destructive.
No, they don't. They shouldn't be. It should be transformative.
It's easy, but a lot of people don't know this.
Just practice what I've talked about in the last hour, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For our listeners, do not just hear this episode as information. I want you to use it. Think about the client, team member, partner, or situations you need to address. And all you need to do is prepare yourself, listen deeply. Remember, listening is very important. Silence is very important. And one thing I heard today, which is very powerful, is name the emotion. Once you name the emotion, you've done, like a huge percentage of it. Then live with courage. That difficult conversation may become your next business breakthrough. And until next time, I want to say keep building, keep leading. And remember, the difficult conversation you are avoiding may be the breakthrough your business has been waiting for. So make sure you follow, like, and share this conversation to somebody who needs to listen to this. I want to say thank you, Doug, for joining us today and giving us a lot of knowledge for this conversation today. And hopefully, I would love to have you on the show where we can actually talk about a dedicated conversation that focus more on leadership. Thank you so much. And thank you, and have a nice day, guys.